Hi there, everybody. Welcome to the IBTC presentation on the CIMA case study. My name is Moses Tebe. I've been lecturing with IBTC since 2014, and I've been lecturing the management case study in particular since 2015. So quite a bit of experience in that. I'm also a qualified CGMA and looking forward to giving you a good little background on IBTC as well as the case study exam itself. So hope you enjoy the session and let's get right to it. So during the session, I'm going to spend some time firstly understanding a bit more about IBTC. I'm guessing a lot of you are possibly prospective students and are still wondering, is IBTC the right tuition provider for me? And what is it that they really have to offer? So we'll spend some time covering that just so you've got a good picture. Then we'll really get to the heart of the matter, which is the case study exam. Firstly, understanding what is the case study and what is expected of you, how do the exam works. This is basically for us to paint a picture of what the end result looks like. If we understand what we're working towards, then you can get a clear picture as to how we prepare ourselves for it and how we work our way there. Then we'll spend some time looking at the importance of the pre-scene as part of the case study exam, and then some tips on how we approach the exam itself. A lot of students will tell you that the case study exam is very, very different to any exam that they've written before, and as a result, we need to tailor our approach to that as well. Then lastly, we'll spend some time just touching on some of the support options that IBTC offers you in your journey to passing the case study exam. So firstly, let's talk a little bit about IBTC. So IBTC has been around since 2006 and has helped over 10,000 students in preparing for the exams. So that's quite a strong and long track record to have. But more importantly to you as a student is really, a lot of students have prepared, but will I actually pass and can you help me do that? IBTC is also the longest standing CIMA Global Learning Premium Partner. What does that mean? In order to be a premium partner, IBTC has to have pass rates that are above the global average. So I'm pretty sure for a lot of the exams that you're doing, you spent the time to see, well, how difficult is it? What do the pass rates look like? And you'd know what they look like for that particular paper. To be a premium partner, it means IBTC has shown the ability to consistently perform above that global average. But at the core of it, and in order to understand IBTC a bit better, you need to understand what it is that they really stand for. One motto you'll see in today, in the open day, and in a lot of interaction you have is the term enhancing your career and enriching lives. And that's really at the core of what IBTC wants to do. And how do they aim to do that in a manner that matters to you as a student? You will see a lot of mention as well of what we call the pass assured promise. This is basically saying IBTC is invested in making sure that you pass the first time. The systems, the methodology, the support structure that's in place, the material being used, and the course structure is all pursuant to doing that. And we trust it so much that we are saying, if you happen not to pass the first time, we will support you and stick by you up until such time as you do. And that's really quite a strong value statement to put forward, but also shows that they're willing to put their money where their mouth is and actually take a vested interest in your success as well. Another question we quite frequently get asked is around the study material being used. As CIMA is a global qualification, there are different study resources that are available. IBTC in particular choose to use BPP study resources. For one, we found that from an offering perspective, BPP has got a very good balance, not just from study text, but also in some of the workbooks they provide, the online platforms, as well as the practice and mock exams that they put in front of us. Over and above that, there's a very, very sterling record that they could also show that ties in with what IBTC aims to achieve. If you look at this particular picture, you'll see once again the global pass rates, but also the pass rate for students who have used BPP material in their preparation. And as you can see, students that have used BPP material have shown a significantly better performance in each of the case study exams as opposed to the global average. And this is one of the enablers that allows us to be able to perform above and beyond with combining all of these resources in order to prepare students and make sure that they are set up for success. So as you enter the fray or join IBTC and start to get your study material, you can have full confidence that BPP is the right publisher and that the course structure and the way it's being delivered and offered to you is the optimal combination to get you across that finish line. So a lot of you who've joined CIMA have probably done a bit of work in understanding the background and understanding the structure of the qualification as well. So you know that under each level, we've got 3 subjects or 3 pillars, which is the E pillar, the P pillar, and the F pillar. And at the end of each of those, or once you've done all 3, you then get the case study exam, which is what our focus is today. Very important to note as well is the fact that when you look at the operational level, just above the operational case study exam, they tell you that you're being awarded with a qualification. That's your CIMA Diploma in Management Accounting. Once you complete the management level, it's a CIMA Advanced Diploma in Management Accounting. So basically with each level you complete comes a qualification pursuant to the level of skill and knowledge that you have demonstrated. And it's also important to note that it's the case study that is the last leg that shows your proficiency and actually takes you to that step of being able to being awarded that qualification. Some students obviously come through the system itself, but some of us might be coming in through advanced entry points. This means that you have been exempted from certain papers, sometimes from all 3 papers for a particular level, and are going in right at the case study. Sometimes you might be exempted from entire levels altogether, and you might be coming in at the management or even the strategic case study. It's also quite important to understand that with each of the gateway routes, it's imperative to see that even though you've been exempted from a subject, get the comfort in that you know what makes up that specific paper. Because the case study exam itself will always examine you as if you have passed the objective tests for all 3 pillars. So if you're coming in through one of the advanced entry routes, it's always great to get exemptions, but it puts additional onus on you to take the responsibility to ensure that there are no knowledge gaps as you step into the exam in order to be successful and actually perform at the level that we want. So let's jump right into the case study exam. So the case study exam, as you've seen in the previous picture, is almost the culmination of all of your knowledge, right? You will do the 3 respective pillars, and that's where you're now being examined on how well you can actually apply them. It's one thing to have the technical knowledge, but now the case study exam starts to ask the question of whether can you take this knowledge that you have and apply it on a day-to-day basis to solve real-world business problems. Similarly, the same way that we saw a qualification at the end of each level, this is really the exam that gives that confidence to say that you have shown your ability to perform at the level that is expected of someone at the management, operational, or even the strategic level. And each of these levels has a different skill set that is required from you. And we're going to spend some time looking at that shortly. So if you look at the operational case study, there you'll see that your role is that of the finance officer. What does this mean? It basically means that the focus on this one is really on the short term and on implementing decisions. So the skill set that's required from you in each of the levels basically grows gradually. And you'll see that the responsibility and the focus changes as well. So when we're looking at the operational level and we look at the E pillar, this is where you're likely to get the questions around project management, around people, around technology, and how we basically bring all of those together. F1 is around financial reporting, showing that we have the technical understanding and we know how the different statements or the different financial statements should actually be prepared. Remember, you won't need to prepare them, but you must be able to write in narrative form how that preparation should take place. You must be able to say how a specific transaction must be treated and actually be able to scrutinize in certain cases once work has been done, whether it has been done correctly or not. Then the P pillar will start to touch on our costing, understanding things like absorption versus variable costing, and being able to guide on the right format to use, but more importantly, understanding the benefits, drawbacks, and applicability of different costing techniques as well. An additional feature that makes the case study exam different, and this applies to case studies at all levels, is it also examines or tests your ability to communicate and to present your knowledge in a professional and clear manner. And this is almost the first taste of it at the operational level. So it's some of the small things that basically say it's one thing to have the knowledge, but can I actually communicate it in a manner that the recipient of my communication understands it as well? And this is what's required of us in the real world. We can be subject matter experts at what we know, but we need to be able to bring everyone along on that journey with us. And the case study exam starts to develop that skill within each of the students. At the management case study level, there we move a level higher, right? So not just academically, but in your career, you'd probably be a level high as well. And this now puts you in the shoes of the finance manager. And there the focus starts to shift. Now we start to look at how we translate our long-term goals into medium-term plans. What that looks like is from an E perspective. Once again, you get project management, but now you also start to look at aspects such as managing change, managing conflict, choosing between different strategic options, as well as how we approach strategy. So there it's really to say we have this long-term picture in mind. We have these options that are in front of us. Which route do we take that will help us achieve this long-term goal? And that's how we are translating the long-term into medium-term plans. From an F2 perspective and financial reporting, once again, understanding what is the right way to do certain things. Here, you're more likely to be given a scenario and asked, what is the correct treatment for this? Or also understanding from a financial ratios perspective, what are some of the things that we can do in order to improve the financial performance? And that's really how it starts to come out. From the P pillar, over and above costs, here you also need to start looking at how we do investment appraisal and weigh out different strategic options that are in front of us. Like we say, when we've got a long-term vision, and this is one of the things that you get in the pre-scene, we will have a lot of options that are in front of us that are intended to get us to that end result. Not all of them will be as effective as one another in being able to do so. So being able to evaluate these strategic options becomes a very, very important thing as well. As we get to the strategic case study, and this is the highest level right before you are at the level of being a CGMA, here we start to look at how you can drive long-term strategic decisions. This basically says you see the shift going from at operational level, there's still quite a bit of technical knowledge that's required of you. That you must still be able to tell us how do we actually get our hands dirty in this. Whereas at the strategic level, everything's a bit more high level there, right? There's not as much technical knowledge that's required of you. But what's more important is the ability to, one, communicate well, two, persuade, thirdly, being able to use all the knowledge that you have in order to make clear, logical arguments in order to drive the direction of the organization. And this is at a strategy level and basically guiding how we basically move and what decisions will bind us for the long term. So here, quite important is you'll see that it starts to lean a lot more on your judgment, on being able to give a lot more practical responses, but each of the things that you do are at the end of the day backed by the knowledge that you have. And that's what ends up supporting it. So that's how we start to look at what we know as tools that we just draw from and that guide our thinking, but the responses we give are based on solving the business problems that sit in front of us. When we look at the exam cycle, there's been a few key changes from the old to the new syllabus when we look at how the CIMA case study exam cycle works. So we still have a pre-scene that's made available 7 weeks before the exam, but the difference is each pre-scene is now valid for 2 sittings. So one pre-scene will be used for both November and February, and another one will be used for both May and August. What this means and what a lot of students then obviously tend to do is they'll write the case study for the first time, preferably when it's the first time that pre-scene is being used. So for example, in May, because should they happen to be unsuccessful, then you know we're still using the same pre-scene for August. So when you prepare for the August sitting, you're not starting from scratch, right? When we look at the pre-scene, we'll spend some time looking at the detail behind it, but this basically gives us all the background information that we need to know. Over and above that, there's some aspect or students like to look at what external research is required. Every now and then, you could do it at a high level, but it's not something to really get bogged down on. The most important thing is understanding the pre-scene itself. Very important is the results after you've written the exam come out about 6 to 7 weeks after. So there is that bit of an anxious wait before you know whether you're successful or not. And then obviously, like we said, in some settings, you can have the same pre-scene basically working across 2. When we look at the pre-scene itself, this is the first taste that you basically have of the case study. This gives you all the background information that you need to know in order to know it well. So there's 2 dynamics that are at play here. You're going to get 25 to 30 pages of information. But more importantly, like we said in the previous slide, you are going to get this information 7 weeks before the exam. What this means is that you are required to know this information like someone who's had it in front of them for 7 weeks. In the exam, the expectation is that you answer as if you work in this organization on a day-to-day basis. You'll see in that little snippet at the bottom, speaks about your role. It says there, you are the finance officer. You aren't a consultant or an external advisor. You are there. This organization is your bread and butter, which is why pre-scene analysis and understanding the pre-scene is so important. Included in the pre-scene are things such as your role, the organization, the business and operating models that they may be using, understanding the industry, understanding some of the issues that they're currently going through, the risks, the financials, understanding the organogram of how the organization is basically split up. And then they also give you some nice articles so you can have a good view of some of the current affairs that are surrounding the industry or the organization itself. When we spoke about research and how we bring this in, always bear in mind, this is a fictitious organization and it will be in a fictitious country. The reason that's the case is because they're saying this is the scope of information that we need to use. So you don't introduce any new information in your responses. Any research that we do should be limited to understanding the industry better. If there are certain things that are quite topical or some issues that are raised in the pre-scene that you see might reflect real life, as a way to sort of jog up some ideas, you might maybe find out how some companies in the real world have solved similar problems. You with me? But at the end of the day, our answers and our context is limited to the information that's been given to us. And that's why the pre-scene and analyzing it well becomes so important. Another important tool with these exams is that after each sitting has been completed, and a pre-seen won't be used any further. That pre-seen, each variant of the exam and the actual questions that were asked gets made available. The suggested solution gets made available, but most importantly, you also get the examiner's comments. This is the examiner, after having marked all the exams, giving you feedback to say students who performed badly because they did this. Students who were average, their answers looked this way. Students who performed extremely well, their answers looked like this. That starts to give you a good sort of framework to understand that if I want to give a good quality answer, this is how it should be. And basically getting that into your mind, having it in the back of your mind and building that discipline in your preparation means that by the time we get to the exam itself, it's almost second nature. And that's what we want, to make sure that we're among the excellent students and we're not among the poor performing ones. Something else that's quite valuable is understanding the exam blueprint. And this is freely available on the CIMA website, but also if you are using the BPP material, this is also made available quite thoroughly in the BPP material. What the blueprint does is give you a clear breakdown of the skills that are required from you and the knowledge that is required from you for that exam. It also gives you the weighting of how much each of those competencies or skills will make up of the exam. So this ends up becoming your way to keep yourself honest, to say, if I feel that I've studied and covered all the work, I should be able to go through each of these I can statements and put a tick next to them because yes, I can do it. If you read through them and there's something that makes you feel a bit nervous, it lets you know that maybe you should go back and work or brush up on that specific piece of work. Important as well with the BPP material is that for the case study, in the toolkit, they put together a list of I can statements that have been developed specifically based on that pre-seen and that exam sitting, where they look at some of the dynamics that are made or that are portrayed in the pre-seen and say, we can see these skill sets being demanded of us. And how do each of these I can statements then look in particular or with a specific pre-seen in mind? Over and above that, with each of the practice exams or mock exams, each question, after you've done it and when you look at the suggested solution will tie it back and say, this is the I can statement being examined. So if you do find a question that you found particularly difficult or did not perform well in, it's always important to be able to understand, this is the piece of work that was being examined. This is what I need to work on. And touching on that as well is understanding the mock exam. It's to say mock exams are quite a key bit or key aspect in our preparation. I wouldn't recommend going into the real exam without having tried a few mock exams already, because that's really sort of your practice platform. That's where you see how ready you are, and ideally that's where you put yourself under the pressure of the exam itself to see how you would perform in that scenario. Then when we look at the exam, what you'll see is that at the operational management level, the exam is made up of 4 different tasks, strategic level made up of 3 tasks. You'll see, like we said, this is basically a simulation of you spending a day in the life of someone in a particular role. So the requirement will come to you by means of an email from one of your colleagues, giving you a scenario that has occurred and asking for your guidance in solving it. Right. One of the nicest things as well, and you'll see it there basically highlighted or circled in red, is that for each of the subtasks, you are given an indicative mark allocation. They are telling you that in subtask A, 55% of the marks come from there. Subtask B, 45% of the marks come from there. What does this mean for us? We need to use this in order to guide the amount of time that we spend on each of the subtasks. If 55% of the marks are on subtask A, it follows that we must spend 55% of the time on subtask A. Time in the case study exam is your most valuable commodity. How well we manage it and how well we optimize it will directly impact how well we do in the exam. For example, if you're looking at the operational management case study where a task is 45 minutes long, if you're doing task number 1 and you've got 45 minutes, if you finish within 30 minutes by some reason and you click next, this does not mean you've got 15 extra minutes for the next task or the task after that. You forfeit that 15 minutes. Basically, that time allocation is relevant to that task. So it's more important that we use the 45 minutes and we use it optimally, and we make sure that we're strict on how we spread our time. The reason why we're so strict on how we spread our time is to say subtask A, they've already told you, makes up 55% of the marks. It is more important that we can give a well-rounded, good quality answer on each of the subtasks, as opposed to giving an excellent answer for subtask A and a very bad answer for subtask B, because we're basically forfeiting 45% of the marks. You with me? So what's very important is that we use time as a tool to guide us, optimize our performance, and basically delegate the rate of work in each of the tasks accordingly. Another thing to consider around the exam is the fact that, unlike the objective test, this exam is marked by an actual human, right? That's the other reason why we have to wait 7 weeks before we can get our results. So that adds an additional dynamic to say, when you actually do the exam itself, it's important that you present your work in a manner that's easy to read, easy to understand, and is clear. You want to make it as easy as possible for the examiner to give you your marks. That means each point you make, we do it in a nice short paragraph that's clear. We don't answer in bullet points. We don't waffle and go around the issue. That won't serve us well, right? So we make clear, concise points, each in their own paragraph with spacing in between. We use headings, we underline them, we put bold, we make it as easy to follow and easy to read as possible, because if that's the case, it's easy to get the marks as well. Then the result, when you do receive it, you'll see you'll get either pass or fail, and you'll see that you need to get a raw mark of 80 or above, and that's out of 150. So very, very important that when you look at that number, the number you're looking for is 80, but ideally you want to be aiming for about 100 out of 150 to make sure that you're in that margin of safety, right? Because what you will also find is a lot of students who will tell you they were unsuccessful in the case study exam were most likely in the region of the 70s. It's very seldom that the guys were very far from the 80 mark. This is the reason why we say we're not aiming for 80, we're aiming for 100 and above out of 150. That way we know we can do extremely well and shoot the lights out no matter what. So some of the key things to think of in our preparation for the exam. One is that this is a skills-based exam. It's really about how we apply the knowledge that we have. But we can't undervalue the knowledge itself. We can't have knowledge gaps, because if those knowledge gaps exist, it reflects in the quality of answer, and the answer will not score well. The knowledge is basically what we use in order to support all the arguments we put forward and basically put weight behind the points that we've made. So it's important that if there are any knowledge gaps, we address them. If you have, or if you're writing the case study as a result of coming through an advanced entry route, or you've been exempted, this particularly means for whatever papers you've been exempted for, take the time to make sure there are no knowledge gaps, because you will be examined as if you wrote the objective test for that particular paper. We've already discussed the importance of knowing the pre-scene thoroughly and intimately. We've spoken about the importance of going through examiner's reports. This puts you in the mind of the examiner and tells you that the person marking my paper will be looking for these things. This is what I must be good at. This is what I must avoid. That's a very key thing to know, and start to practice already as you do practice questions or mock exams. We've explained the importance of doing mock exams. This is your opportunity to really practice and get a feel for what the real exam will be like. Over and above just testing your skills and your knowledge, the importance of doing mock exams under timed conditions similar to the exam is also to give you practice. as to how you sit, focus, and perform optimally for 3 hours in a row. What we mean by that, you'll know in your workbook, you'll have a lot of questions that are in bits and pieces and they're 45 minutes long. You'll do that question, you'll go through the memo, take a break, do the next one, etc. You might work for 3 or 4 hours, but you've not focused consistently for 3 hours and been required to perform optimally. The same way that if every day you run 10 kilometers or do a 10-kilometer jog every single day, doesn't mean that after 5 days you can wake up and run 50 in one go. You kind of need to practice 50 at some point or other. You're with me, or somewhere close to there. And that's the reason why the mock exams are important. They start to simulate the real exam and get us used to what will be required of us in order to perform optimally. The fifth point, telling us we don't prepare answers in advance. This can also be worded in the sense to say, you aren't being asked to show how well you know the theory. If you see a question about the balanced scorecard, and you know that in the mock exam they asked about the balanced scorecard, even if you remembered that memo verbatim and put it into the other exam, you might find you don't score well because they haven't asked you the same thing. Yes, it pertained to that, but the question itself is different. In this exam, it's less important to show how well you know the theory. What's important is answering what has been asked. You've been presented with a problem statement. Give the solution that they're asking for there. Your knowledge and the technical aspects are some of the tools that you use in order to get to that answer, but are not the basis itself. The third last one's around how we basically approach it in a situational manner. I've spoken about how we reference everything to the specific scenario, to this pre-scene and the information given in front of you. But another part of it is knowing our audience and making sure we're communicating well enough. What I always say is have a standard form of communication that's just clear and easy to understand, because then regardless of your audience, it will make sense. An example of this, if you're being asked to explain whether the cost of capital being used in a specific calculation is appropriate or not, if you're explaining it to the financial director, you can use all the financial and CIMA terms that you want. They'll understand it. If you're explaining it to the marketing director, because this is a marketing investment, you might need to dumb down the way you explain it a little bit. So maybe just use that almost consistently to say no matter who we're explaining it to, no matter which piece of work we're basically presenting, we must present it in such a way that it's easy for anyone to understand, even if they don't have the same technical knowledge as you, especially if they don't have the same technical knowledge as you. Because in the exam, you'll see the colleagues that are asking for your guidance come from any part of the organization. Then the last two basically speak to what we were saying, answer the question that you were given, make sure your response relates to that, and don't just dump knowledge. This is not a test of how well you know the technical bit. Remember, you assume to have passed the objective test. They know you know the work. Now it's about how can you use it in solving day-to-day business problems. But one of the best ways, and what we do with IBTC, is actually putting forward our case study classes. This is where we've gotten some of our best results for basically preparing you for the classes themselves. The CIMA case study exam prep classes are a very, very key thing and add an additional dynamic as opposed to preparing by yourself. What do we mean by this? Firstly, in the classes, we also get the benefit of collective knowledge. This is one thing that's so great about a class. To say you're going to have a group of people all with different backgrounds, maybe even one of them works in the same industry that the pre-scene is on. But when you're looking at something like this, and because the pre-scene is about taking our knowledge and putting forward an argument and supporting it with the work that we know, you could find that in a class of 10, there might be 10 different interpretations of viewpoints on the same thing. So this gives us the basis to actually share all of those, debate them if necessary, and start to scrutinize our own thinking. In doing that, we tend to understand the pre-scene better and also be better prepared for the exam. If we work by ourselves, we're basically seeing everything from one lens. This allows us to have a diversity of viewpoints coming together and being able to consolidate that knowledge. So the classes themselves take place over 2 weekends. So that's basically a full day on a Saturday and a full day on a Sunday, then a 1 weekend break. The weekend after that, another 2 full days. What you'd cover in that time is firstly making sure that everyone has the same baseline of knowledge, especially because there's so many instances of students who are also coming in through the advanced entry routes. This will allow you to start identifying where some knowledge gaps might sit. So we touch on some of the core topics that are important, that are expected of you to know very, very well. Then we also spend quite a lot of time simply understanding and unpacking the pre-scene. We've said this is a very, very important aspect. We spend a full day on this, and at the end of that day, you're well on your way to understanding it as if you work there on a day-to-day basis. So it is a very, very tiring exercise, but one of the most valuable things that you can do for yourself. Then we spend another day looking at exam technique, and we spend 2 days on mock exams as well. So with the mock exams, what we start to do is we simulate the actual exam environment. We do the mock exam, 3 hours under time conditions. And then the most valuable piece about it is that the mock exam you've done as part of these classes will get marked, and you will get feedback based on your specific performance. If you've ever written the exam before, the actual CIMA case study exam, you'll know that the feedback you get back doesn't quite give you a good indication to say you need to do better at this in order to be successful. That's why, you tend to find some students repeat it quite a few times. The feedback is not thorough enough to give you direction as to what you need to improve on. So with the 2 mock exams that we do as part of these classes, you will get personalized feedback on where the gaps are, what you can do to improve, and how you can basically drive your performance. And that's one of the most valuable things. And as you see in the bottom left corner, if you follow this system diligently, it comes with that pass first time guarantee. We believe in it, we've seen it, it's produced some outstanding results. When we follow the system, all we need is 2 weekends, dedicating yourself to that time, doing the work that's necessary in between, attending and doing the mock exams, taking into account the feedback, and you'll be well placed to perform well in the case study exam. Some of the study methods that are available is our campus classes. This is obviously our face-to-face. You also have our virtual classes that you could use. Obviously, with with COVID, this might become a very, very attractive option. We also have our online classes, whereby you go through some video lectures and online tests. For those who want a bit more flexibility, we also have home study, which you can use, and home study online as well. So there's a variety of study methods that is basically there to suit your time and availability, but can basically make sure that you can perform optimally based on the time you have available and the capacity you have to prepare for the exam. And in getting ourselves there, we've spoken quite a bit around the study material. When we look at the case study in particular, you will see that we've spoken about the toolkit that you receive, but depending on your level of readiness, that really dictates which study material you'll be using. At the bottom of that pyramid, you see E, P, and F. This is basically the study texts for the 3 respective pillars, right? This is where we're still getting the knowledge, the technical and theoretical knowledge. Above that is the workbook. The workbook is specific to the case study and starts to give you case study type questions and tests you similar to what you'd be tested in a case study. Then in the toolkit, this is particular to that sitting and basically starts to work through the pre-scene and prepare you for the exam that's coming up in that particular sitting. So if you're a Gateway student coming through the SAICA or CFO entry route, it would be important, like we said, to firstly look at some of the study texts in order to plug any knowledge gaps that exist. If you've already passed and done the OTs and been successful, then obviously you've got that knowledge and you've demonstrated it. Then it's important to start off with the workbook, where you start to get yourself into that rhythm of answering or taking the knowledge you have and being able to apply it in a case study type scenario and answer case study type questions. Then once we've done that, that's when we move to the material that is specific to this sitting and based on the pre-scene. That's when we take all the knowledge and skills we have and we're now applying it to this organization that we work in, making sure we understand the context and understanding how every single piece of that puzzle fits together in order to solve the problems of this organization. The three elements that you'll see are very, very important and that basically feed on from the previous pyramid is one, know your content. Like we said, there can't be any knowledge gaps. So the first thing we're doing at that bottom level of that pyramid is making sure we know our work. Second part of that pyramid is practicing answering case study tasks, right? And that's where we're talking about the non-integrated case study practice. And that's where our workbook comes in quite well to help us with that. Then the last and the highest level, once we've basically marked off the bottom two tiers of this pyramid, is the real case study analysis, answering integrated, and question practice. This is not to say we know the work itself. We've worked on our ability and style of answering. Now we're applying all of this to this real world situation that we basically have. So when we look at how much time is necessary to prepare for the exam itself, we know that not everyone or not every student's day looks the same. We have different commitments. Some students have month ends to deal with. And just availability is obviously not a uniform thing. Students generally take about 6 weeks to prepare for the case study exam. And over that 6 weeks, cover about 96 hours of work. If you think 6 weeks is a lot, simply thinking about it, if we're getting the pre-scene 7 weeks before the exam, that basically says from the time the pre-scene is available, we need to start working, right? We can't take any of that time for granted. It's very important that one, you spend time getting the knowledge or basically revising whatever subjects and closing any knowledge gaps, doing question practice, doing the pre-scene analysis. In the week or two leading up to the exam, there we should be purely looking at mock exams and just the application and making sure that we're building our capability to perform well there. 2 of those weeks can be dedicated to coming to the exam prep classes. And obviously doing that cuts down the time quite significantly and starts to accelerate your progress quite a bit as well. Coming to the exam prep classes though, doesn't take away any of the other work. I think what it'll help you do is focus your efforts in between. Because it's such a structured method, because it's a system that we follow in order to unearth and unpack the pre-scene as well, you'll find that your efforts after that are quite focused and you know exactly what you need to work on in the time leading up to the exam itself. It's obviously very, very daunting and quite overwhelming, especially if there are knowledge gaps that you might feel like you need to cover everything. Coming to the classes tends to trim that down quite a bit and focus your effort on what is most important. And like we said, the key thing that really, really sets us apart is the trust in the system, the experience that we have in delivering this tuition, and the results that have basically come from it. To be able to consistently perform above the global average and produce the pass rates that we do, also going as far as believing in it so much that we have this pass first time guarantee. We're so confident you'll pass the first time that you can come back free if you don't. That really shows how much we believe in the system that we have, the course structure, the material, and actually taking the journey with us. Hopefully, as you start your journey with IBTC, you'll gain that same level of confidence and understand why this is the case. All right, so we've reached the end of our formal presentation. Hopefully you have enjoyed it quite a bit. Now that you know about the case study quite well, please go to the IBTC website, select the Book Now button. What this will allow you to do is actually complete a booking form. Even if you're still a bit unsure, it's not really a firm commitment yet. You want to go do it until you basically have a reference number. That means you can always come back and pick up where you left off. But more than anything, it'll allow you to get a quote, understand what you'll get, understand the payment options that are available to you, and it's really just the first step in you starting your CIMA journey and being ready to start your studies as well. Also important, when you do get that quote, is understanding that, like we said, it's a no commitment quote. It allows us to have your information, understand what you're interested in. One of our student advisors can obviously then call you, get in touch to understand your specific needs. Also very important, if you already have a good idea of what it is that you're trying to sign up for and are ready to get started with classes, you'll find that there are a variety of payment plans to assist with that as well. Also important to understand is that the IBTC payment plan comes with 0% interest. So if you're on the payment plan, no interest is charged on that. Also understanding that everything from tuition to study material to tutor support is all in the price. So the price that you see quoted there, there's nothing hidden over and above that. Price that you get there covers you all the way around. Like we said, very important, get on the site itself, go as far as getting a reference number. One of our student advisors will be in touch, and you can basically pick up your journey there and be able to take the next step. So thank you once again for joining this session with me. There's obviously still quite a lot happening today. You'll see that there are quite a few other rooms that are there for you to enjoy. So take the time, explore, go ahead and see, find out a bit more about IBTC, understand an introduction to CIMA, find out more about the pass assured guarantee, but basically take the time and make the most of this open day. I think you'll get all the valuable knowledge you need in order to start your CIMA journey. I hope you have enjoyed this presentation, and I look forward to seeing all of you quite soon in class and getting ready for the next case study. All the best, and we'll see you all soon.